Part 5. The echo across stars. 5 years had passed since the battle. Velnaros had transformed from a forgotten world into one of the galaxy's success stories. The Velnar now sat on important galactic committees. Their economy thrived. Their culture flourished. Their children grew up knowing safety and hope. Elena served as Velnaros' primary ambassador to the wider galaxy. Her firstborn child, named Dawan in honor of the human captain who had vowed to remember, was 4 years old now. He would grow up in a very different world than his great-grandfather had known. But the real transformation had happened across the galaxy itself. What began with humanity's intervention had become something much larger. The Velnaros Accord had grown to include 93 species. The core principle, that the capacity to help creates the obligation to help, was changing how civilizations interacted. Species that had long been overlooked or exploited found themselves with unexpected allies. Larger, more powerful species began reconsidering their values. The question was no longer just what can we gain, but what should we do? Humanity's actions had planted a seed, and that seed was growing into something beautiful. A new crisis emerged in the Helios sector. The Vralith, a peaceful species of farmers and artists, faced extinction from a rogue asteroid on collision course with their homeworld. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to debate intervention. The cost would be enormous. The Vralith had little strategic value. Was it worth the expense? Before the debate could conclude, an announcement shocked the chamber. 50 species had already launched a joint deflection mission. Humanity led the effort, but they were joined by the Pelthorians, the Yanther, the Velnar, and dozens of others. The mission was already underway. Ambassador Jiwoo, now silver-haired but still sharp, addressed the council. We did not wait for debate because lives do not wait for bureaucracy. The Vralith need help now, so we are helping now. Any species that wishes to join us is welcome. The deflection mission succeeded. Massive human ships pushed the asteroid off course while Velnar engineers calculated trajectories and Pelthorian vessels provided support. The Vralith were saved. Their world was safe. And they had been saved not by one species but by a coalition united by a simple idea: help those who need help. The Vralith delegation came to the Galactic Council afterward. Their spokesperson, a gentle being named Thress, addressed the assembly with tears in her eyes.
We are a small species.
We have little to offer. But you saved us anyway, why? Woneth, now a young engineer and part of the Velnar delegation, stood to answer. Because someone once taught us that life is precious, that doing the right thing matters more than profit or power. We learned from the best. He gestured to the human delegation. And the humans learned from us. Now it is time the whole galaxy learned this lesson. Something unexpected happened then. A Kryn delegate stood. Her name was Silrith, and she was young, part of a reform movement that had been growing within Kryn society. We Kryn were wrong, she said, her voice shaking slightly. About the Velnar. About honor. About what true strength means. The humans showed us that real power lies not in taking what we want, but in protecting those who need protection. Our species has much to learn. We have much to atone for. The Kryn reform movement had been sending ships and resources to help with humanitarian missions. It was a small gesture from a species known for aggression, but it represented a profound shift. Young Kryn had watched humanity defend the Velnar and felt ashamed of their own government's actions. They were trying to change their entire culture, one generation at a time. Admiral Min Seo, now in command of the defense forces in the Velnaros sector, visited Earth to speak at the military academy. She was there to address new officers beginning their training. Commander Jiho, Woneth's friend from university, introduced her. Min Seo told the story of the Eternal Dawn to the young cadets. Most had heard it before. Every human child learned this story, but she told it differently than they had heard before. Thilis and his crew were not soldiers, Min Seo said. They were not rich. They were not powerful. They were ordinary beings who did something extraordinary because it was the right thing to do. When we built the ships that defended Velnaros, when we crossed the galaxy to stand between the Velnar and annihilation, we were not being heroic. We were being human. We were keeping a promise. We were honoring a debt. She looked at the young faces before her, seeing hope and determination in their eyes. Every one of you will face choices in your life. Choices between what is easy and what is right. between what benefits you and what helps others, between following orders and following your conscience. When those moments come, remember Thelis. Remember that a small merchant captain with a fragile ship and a big heart changed the course of galactic history. Remember that what you do for others defines who you are. The cadet sat in silence, absorbing her words. One young officer raised her hand. Admiral, what if we face a situation where helping others could cost us everything? Minseo smiled. Then you remember that some things are worth any price. The Velnar taught us that. They gave up everything to save strangers. And look what happened. They gained friends who would cross the stars for them. They gained protection. They gained prosperity. But most importantly, they gained the knowledge that their kindness mattered. That is worth more than any fortune. On Velnaros, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The defense platforms orbited silently, rarely needed but always ready. Human and Velnar worked together so naturally now that young people could barely remember a time when their species were not close friends. Daewon, Elenis's son, played with human children who lived on Velnaros. Their parents were engineers, teachers, diplomats who had chosen to stay and make this beautiful world their home. The children spoke both languages, switching between them without thinking. They learned both cultures. They were growing up as living bridges between two species. Ambassador Jiwoo gave her final address to the Galactic Council before retirement. She was old now, her body tired, but her voice was still strong. 25 years ago, the Velnar saved 50,000 humans, she began. They did not do it for reward. They did not do it for recognition. They did it because it was right. That single act of compassion changed the galaxy, not through conquest or economics, but through example. She paused, looking around the great chamber. Humanity's gift to the Velnar was not the ships or the shields or the technology. It was the message. You matter. Your kindness mattered. You are seen. You are valued. You are protected. That is the gift we must all give each other. Her voice grew stronger. The Velnar taught us this truth. We simply had the honor of teaching it to the rest of you. And now that lesson is spreading. Species helping species. Strong protecting weak. Rich sharing with poor. Not because it profits them, but because it is right. The chamber was silent. Even the species that had opposed humanity's intervention in Velnaros were quiet now. They had watched the results. They had seen how the galaxy was changing. It was hard to argue with success. This is the future, Jiwoo concluded. Not perfect. Not easy, but better. A galaxy where kindness matters, where compassion is valued, where we remember those who help us and honor our debts. The Velnar showed us the way. Humanity followed. Now it is time for all of you to join us. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Across the galaxy, the story of the Velnar and the humans became legend. Parents told it to children. Teachers taught it in schools. It became more than history. It became inspiration. Young beings of every species grew up asking themselves, what would I do? Would I risk everything to help strangers? Would I remember a kindness? Would I keep my promises? On Earth, a young boy named Sangwoo listened to his grandmother tell the story. She had been on the Eternal Dawn as a child. She remembered everything. The fear, the desperation, the Velnar faces so strange and alien, working to save them anyway. Did we really build all those ships just for them? Sangwoo asked. His grandmother smiled, touching his face gently. We did, because humans always remember a kindness, and our return gift is unforgettable. Sangwoo thought about this. When I grow up, I want to help people too. I want to be like the Velnar and the humans. His grandmother kissed his forehead. Then you already understand what it means to be part of something greater than yourself. On Velnaros, Daewon piloted a shuttle through the orbital defense network with his co-pilot Seo-ah, a human exchange student. They were young, barely adults, but they had grown up together. They represented the future, a generation that saw no difference between Velnar and human. Only friends working together. Do you think things would be different? Daewon asked. If my great-grandfather had not saved those humans. Seo-ah was quiet for a moment. Maybe. But I think the real question is, do you think the humans would be who they are today if your great-grandfather had not shown them what real courage looks like? They docked at a defense platform. The station was staffed by both Velnar and humans working side by side, protecting a world together. These were weapons of war maintained by people who prayed never to use them, protection offered by those who remembered why it mattered. Part 3. The stand at Velnaros, the human fleet moved forward as one. 400 ships advancing in perfect formation. The Kryn fleet waited in orbit around Velnaros, confident and ready. They had fought many battles. They had won many wars. They expected to win this one too. Admiral Bora opened a communication channel to the Kryn commander. This is your final chance. Leave this system peacefully. The Velnar are under our protection. The Kryn commander was named Vectros. He was an old warrior covered in scars from dozens of battles. He looked at the human fleet and laughed. Foolish humans. You are outnumbered. You have never fought a real war. We will crush you, then we will take Velnaros as planned. You have only added your own casualties to the Velnar ones. Bora's face showed no emotion. You were warned. What happens next is your choice. The Eternal Dawn Reborn moved forward alone, separating from the fleet. Captain Minseo brought her ship between the Kryn fleet and Velnaros. One ship facing 600. The galaxy watched and wondered if the humans had gone mad. Vectros gave the order. All ships fire. Destroy that arrogant vessel. The Kryn fleet opened fire. Hundreds of weapons fired at once. Energy beams, missiles, plasma torpedoes. Everything they had. Enough firepower to destroy a small moon. All of it focused on one ship. The Eternal Dawn Reborn did not even shudder. The ship's shields absorbed everything. They glowed brighter with each impact, but they held. Not just held. They looked like they were barely trying. The Kryn weapons might as well have been throwing stones at a mountain. On Velnaros, millions watched their screens in disbelief. Tillis grabbed Elenis's hand. What kind of ship is that? He whispered. Minseo waited until the Kryn barrage ended. Then she activated one weapon. Just one. The graviton lance fired. It was a beam of pure gravity crushing space itself. The beam hit a Kryn heavy cruiser, one of their largest ships. The cruiser did not explode. It did not burn. It simply crumpled inward, folding in on itself like paper until it became a compressed ball of metal. The Kryn fleet went silent. That cruiser had held 3,000 crew members. Now it was gone, destroyed in seconds by a weapon they had never seen before. Minseo's voice came over all channels, calm and cold. That was a warning. The next shot will not be alone. Leave now or we will remove you. Vectros stared at his screens. Pride and fury warred with shock and fear. His military training told him to retreat. His warrior culture told him never to back down. He made his choice. All ships full assault. Show these humans what Kryn warriors can do. The Kryn fleet charged forward. 600 ships at full speed. Weapons firing continuously. They came at the human fleet from multiple directions, using tactics that had won them victories for generations. The human fleet responded with devastating precision. The 7 Project Gratitude dreadnoughts formed a wall of fire and steel. Their graviton lances fired in sequence, crushing Kryn ships one after another. Their point defense systems released millions of tiny drones that intercepted missiles and torpedoes before they could reach their targets. Their shields absorbed everything else. Commander Hyorin led the human fighter squadrons. She was a veteran pilot and a survivor of the Eternal Dawn. She had been 6 years old when the Velnar saved her. Now she flew a fighter equipped with technology that made her faster and more agile than anything the Kryn had. Her squadron moved through the battlefield like dancers, destroying enemy fighters with almost casual ease. Disable when possible, destroy when necessary, Hyorin reminded her pilots. We are here to save the Velnar, not to commit genocide. The Kryn are not our enemies. Their leaders are. Remember that. The battle was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The humans had spent 20 years developing technology specifically for this moment. Every system had been designed. Every weapon had been tested. Everything had one purpose: to protect the Velnar no matter what stood in the way. Dr. Jae Sung commanded the medical ships. Even as the fighting raged, human rescue vessels moved through the battlefield. They pulled Kryn crew members from damaged ships. They provided medical care to the injured. They saved enemy lives even while the battle continued. A Kryn officer, rescued from his exploding ship, stared at his human saviors in confusion. Why, he asked through a translator. Why save us? We are your enemies. The human medic, a young woman named Yoonji, smiled sadly as she bandaged his wounds. Because life is precious. Because someone once taught us that you save lives when you can, no matter whose lives they are, even if those people do not deserve it. The battle lasted 4 hours. In those 4 hours, the Kryn lost 30 ships destroyed and over 200 disabled. The human losses were 3 ships damaged and 47 casualties. None killed, none destroyed. The difference in capability was absolute. Vectros's flagship was crippled, floating dead in space. His engines were gone. His weapons were gone. His pride was gone. Bora's face appeared on his screen. "This is over. Surrender now. We have no desire to kill you." Vectros looked at his dead screens, his ruined ship, his defeated fleet. He had thought humans were soft. He had thought they were weak. He had been catastrophically wrong. "I surrender," he said quietly. "My fleet surrenders," Bora nodded. "You will leave this system immediately. You will never return, and you will carry a message to your leaders and to the entire galaxy. The Velnar are under human protection. Anyone who threatens them threatens us. Anyone who harms them becomes our enemy. And as you have seen today, we are very good at protecting our friends." The surviving Kryn ships limped away, carrying their dead and wounded. Across the galaxy, billions watched in stunned silence. A species that had been ignored, dismissed, considered insignificant, was now protected by one of the most powerful military forces anyone had ever seen. But the humans were not done. Admiral Bora broadcast to the entire galaxy. "Let this be a lesson to every species, every government, every being who watches today. 20 years ago, the Velnar had nothing to gain by saving 50,000 humans. They did it because it was right. Today, humanity had much to lose by opposing the Kryn dominion. We did it because it was right. Perhaps it is time the galaxy remembered what truly matters." On Velnaros, the celebrations were overwhelming. Millions of Velnar poured into the streets, crying and laughing and embracing each other. They had been saved. They were safe. Their world was still theirs. Thylas could not stand. His old body was too weak. But Elenis helped him to the window, and together they watched the human ships in orbit. The mighty vessels that had crossed the stars to save them. Ships built from gratitude. Ships powered by remembered kindness. They came. Thylas whispered. "They actually came." Elenis held her father close. "You taught them well, father. You showed them what real strength looks like." On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn Reborn, Minseo stood looking at Velnaros on her screens. She thought about her parents, who had told her the story of the rescue every night when she was young. She thought about Thylas and his crew, giving everything to save strangers. She thought about the meaning of honor and debt and gratitude. Her communications officer called out, "Captain, we are receiving millions of messages from Velnaros. They are thanking us. They are crying. They want to know how they can repay us." Minseo smiled for the first time in days. "Tell them they already paid us. 20 years ago, they showed humanity what true courage looks like. Today, we simply returned the lesson. Tell them we are honored to be their friends." The Galactic Council chambers were in chaos. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded sanctions against humanity for unilateral military action. Others argued that humanity had done what the Council should have done. The debate raged for hours. Ambassador Jiwoo waited patiently. When the chamber finally quieted, she spoke. "The Council failed the Velnar. You voted to let them die because it was economically convenient. Humanity chose differently. If that troubles you, perhaps you should examine your own values rather than questioning ours." She paused, then added, "We humans have a saying. We always remember a kindness. Today the galaxy learned what that means. We remember who helped us. We protect who protected us. And we will cross the stars themselves to honor our debts. That is what it means to be human." The message spread across 1,000 worlds. Young beings of every species watched the recording and asked their elders questions. Why did the humans help? Why did they risk so much? Why did they care about the Velnar? The answers varied, but they all came down to the same thing. Because 20 years ago, the Velnar had shown humans that kindness matters, that compassion matters, that doing the right thing matters more than profit or power. And now the entire galaxy was learning that lesson. The battle was over. The Velnar were safe, but something bigger had changed. Something that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. Humanity had shown everyone what it looked like when a species kept its promises. When a civilization valued honor over advantage. When gratitude became action. The Velnar had saved humanity once. Now humanity had returned the gift. But the real gift was not the military victory. It was the reminder that in a cold and often cruel galaxy, kindness still mattered, compassion still mattered, and some debts were worth any price to repay. Part 4. The Gift. The Kryn fleet had retreated. The battle was won, but the human fleet did not leave. Admiral Bo-Ra made an announcement that surprised everyone, including some of her own officers. The Eternal Dawn Reborn and 2 other dreadnoughts will remain in the Velnaro system permanently. 50 escort vessels will stay as well. This system is now under continuous human protection. On Velnaros, the Velnar could barely process this news. A permanent garrison? The humans were staying? Elenis stood before the Planetary Council, trying to answer questions she did not fully understand herself. They say they will stay as long as we need them. They say we will never face a threat alone again. But the military presence was just the beginning. Within days, human transport ships began arriving. Hundreds of them. They did not carry weapons. They carried engineers, scientists, doctors, teachers. Thousands of humans poured into the Velnaro system, and they came to build. Hyojin arrived with a fleet of construction vessels. She was older now, her hair showing gray, but her eyes still sparkled with the same determination she had shown while patching the Eternal Dawn's hull 2 decades ago. She requested a meeting with Velnar engineers, and Elenis volunteered immediately. They met in a conference room overlooking the ocean. Hyojin spread out holographic blueprints that filled the air with light. "We want to build you a defense system," she explained through the translator. "Not to make you into warriors. You are not warriors, and you should not have to be. But you should never have to fear again." Elenis studied the plans with growing amazement. Orbital defense platforms, planetary shield arrays, early warning networks throughout the system, emergency evacuation ships. It was everything the Velnar had never been able to afford, all offered freely. "This must cost enormous amounts," Elenis said quietly. "We cannot pay for this," Hyojin smiled. "You already paid. 20 years ago, your father's crew gave everything to save my ship. This is not charity. This is a debt being repaid." Construction began immediately. Human and Velnar engineers worked side by side. The language barriers caused problems at first, but they learned to communicate through mathematics and diagrams and shared purpose. Elenis found herself working 18-hour days alongside Hyojin, building things she had only dreamed about. The orbital defense platforms were marvels of technology. They required minimal crews and could be operated by Velnar with basic training. They did not rely on aggressive weapons, but on smart defensive systems that could protect the planet from any threat. Within months, Velnaros had better protection than most core worlds. But there was more, much more. Engineer Kyungsu led a different team, one focused on economics rather than defense. He met with Velnar merchants and resource managers. "The Kryn were right about one thing," he said. "Your world does have valuable resources, but you can harvest them without destroying your oceans. We can show you how." The technology the humans brought was revolutionary for the Velnar. Gentle extraction methods that worked with ocean ecosystems rather than against them. Refining processes that produced no pollution. Transportation systems that could reach distant markets quickly. Within a year, Velnar trade ships equipped with human engines could reach markets 3 times faster than before. Velnar medical compounds had always been sought after by aquatic species, but they had been difficult to produce in large quantities. Human biotech specialists worked with Velnar healers to scale up production while maintaining quality. Suddenly, Velnar medicine was in demand across the galaxy. Velnar artists created beautiful works, but they had always struggled to find buyers. Human cultural ambassadors connected them with markets throughout human space. Tourism to Velnaros increased dramatically. Humans came to see the world that saved us. They came to learn about Velnar culture, to swim in the beautiful oceans, to meet the species their parents and grandparents talked about with such reverence. The economic transformation was staggering. Within 2 years, Velnaros went from being a poor, overlooked world to one of the more prosperous systems in its sector, and the humans refused to take any profit. Every credit went to the Velnar. Dr. Taemin, now gray-haired but still energetic, arrived with a delegation of medical professionals. He found Velnar healers using techniques humanity had never seen before. Their understanding of aquatic biology was unmatched. "We should learn from each other," he proposed. "Exchange knowledge, exchange students, exchange innovations." The medical exchange program became one of the most successful collaborations in galactic history. Velnar healers learned human techniques. Human doctors learned Velnar methods. Both species benefited enormously. New treatments for dozens of diseases emerged from this partnership. But the most profound changes happened quietly in schools and universities. Professor Su Young led the education initiative. She established scholarship programs for young Velnar to attend human universities. Young humans came to Velnaros to study. The programs were wildly popular. Woneth, Thalus's grandson, became one of the first Velnar accepted to the Lunar Institute of Technology. He was nervous, uncertain if he belonged among humans who seemed so advanced. On his first day, a human student approached him. His name was Jiho, and his great-grandmother had survived the Eternal Dawn. "My family talks about your people all the time," Jiho said, smiling. "They say the Velnar taught us what true courage looks like. I am honored to study with you." Woneth and Jiho became close friends. Their friendship was featured in news stories across both species. They represented something new, a generation that grew up knowing humans and Velnar were connected by more than just history. They were connected by genuine friendship and mutual respect. Not everyone in the galaxy was pleased by humanity's actions. At the Galactic Council, several species expressed concerns. The Korthan Federation, a coalition of merchant species, was particularly vocal. Their representative, Kolthar, argued passionately, "The humans have set a dangerous precedent." They ignored council authority. They used military force unilaterally. Today it was for a good cause, but what about tomorrow? Ambassador Jiwoo listened patiently to all the complaints. Then she responded calmly, "The council failed the Velnar. You voted to let them die because it was inconvenient to help them. Humanity chose differently. If our choice to save lives troubles you more than your choice to abandon them, then I suggest the problem lies not with humanity, but with your own values." The chamber erupted in arguments. Some agreed with Jiwoo, others were outraged. But the debate itself was important. For the first time, species across the galaxy were questioning what mattered more, following procedure or saving lives. Something unexpected began happening. Other species started looking at their own histories, their own debts, their own forgotten friends. The Pelthorians, rescued from a plague by Velnar medical ships decades ago, approached the humans. "We want to help too," their ambassador said. "The Velnar helped us once. We should contribute to their defense." The Yanthir Collective proposed a mutual protection initiative for smaller species. The idea gained support. Within a year, 47 species had signed what became known as the Velnaros Accord. The core principle proposed by human philosopher Young Mi was simple and powerful. The capacity to help creates the obligation to help. Even some Kryn began to change. Young Kryn who had watched the battle and felt shame at their species' actions formed reform movements. They could not change their government immediately, but they pushed for change. Some even volunteered to work on humanitarian projects, trying to rebuild their species' honor. 1 year after the battle, construction on Velnaros was complete. The defense systems were operational. The economy was thriving. The future looked bright. Admiral Bora prepared to transfer command of the garrison to a permanent protection force. Before leaving, she requested a meeting with Thalus. The old Velnar was very weak now. He spent most of his time resting, surrounded by family. But he insisted on meeting Bora in person. Ilenis helped him to the meeting room where Bora waited. Bora, usually so stern and serious, had tears in her eyes when she saw Thalus. She knelt beside his chair so they could speak face to face. "Honored one," she said through the translator, "we have given you what we could. Is there anything else you need?" Thalus took her hand with his webbed fingers. His voice was very quiet. "You have given us so much. Security, prosperity, hope. We can never repay this debt." Bora shook her head gently. "You already paid the debt, honored one. 20 years ago, you and your crew had everything to lose and nothing to gain. You saved 50,000 humans anyway. You showed us what real courage looks like. You showed us that kindness matters more than profit. You showed us what kind of beings we should be. Everything we have done here is simply ensuring that your lesson echoes through the ages." Thalus wept. "We thought the galaxy had forgotten us. We thought kindness was weakness." Bora smiled, her own tears falling freely now. "Kindness is strength. It is the greatest strength. And humanity never forgets. We remember every kindness, and our return gift is unforgettable." Thalus died peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his family and by the human friends who had become like family. His last words, carefully translated, were, "Tell them it was worth it. Every moment." Part 2, The Forgotten Friends. 20 years had passed since the rescue. The galaxy had moved on to other news, other stories. But on every human world, children learned about the Velnar in their schools. Statues stood in parks showing Thillis and his crew. The story of the gentle current was known by every human alive. Thillis was old now. His body moved slowly and his eyes were tired. But he stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, speaking for his people one last time. Behind him on the massive screens, images showed his beautiful homeworld of Velnaros. Blue oceans, floating cities, millions of Velnar living peaceful lives. The Kryn Dominion has given us 1 year to leave, Thillis said through the translator. His voice was weak but clear. They say our world has valuable minerals beneath the ocean floor. They say they need these minerals more than we need our home. We have lived on Velnaros for 10,000 years. We have nowhere else to go. The council chamber held representatives from 200 species. They listened politely, but many looked bored. The Kryn were powerful. They had strong armies and controlled important trade routes. The Velnar had nothing. This was not really a difficult decision. The vote was called. Species after species voted no. No intervention. No help, no action. The final count appeared on the screens. 127 against helping. 34 for helping. 12 abstentions. The Velnar would face the Kryn alone. Ambassador Jiwoo of Earth stood up. She was young for an ambassador, chosen specifically because she had been a child on the Eternal Dawn. She remembered the Velnar faces leaning over her, sharing their air while she coughed and struggled to breathe. She remembered being saved. I invoke Article 47 of the Galactic Charter, Jiwoo said clearly. The right of collective action. Earth will be pursuing an independent course on this matter. The chamber filled with confused murmuring. What could one species do? Humans were relatively new to the galaxy. They had decent ships and okay technology, but they were not a major power. They certainly could not challenge the Kryn military. The news reached Earth within hours. Then it spread to Mars, to New Terra, to every human colony across the stars. On every world, the same story was told again. The story of the Eternal Dawn. The story of Thillis and his crew. The story of the small ship that gave everything to save strangers. Taemin was a doctor now on Mars, respected and successful. He was watching the news when he saw Thillis on the screen, old and pleading for his people. Taemin remembered working beside the Velnar in the medical bay, remembered them sharing air with dying children. His hand started shaking. He made a call. Heejin answered immediately. She had become the most famous shipbuilder in human space. She had been waiting for Taemin's call. You saw, she said. It was not a question. We have to do something, Taemin replied. I know. I already started making calls. They contacted Daewon next. He was retired, living quietly on Earth, but his name still carried weight. When he heard about the Velnar, he did not hesitate. Together, the 3 survivors put out a message that spread across human space like fire. The Velnar saved 50,000 of us. Now it is our turn. What happened next shocked the entire galaxy. Human governments on 37 worlds contributed ships and resources. Private companies donated materials and manufacturing capacity. Individual humans gave money, time, skills. Veterans who had retired came back, volunteering by the millions. They all said the same thing. We owe them. We must repay. Sung Ho was a wealthy industrialist. He had been 5 years old on the Eternal Dawn, and he remembered a Velnar crew member giving him water when there was barely any water left. Now he was rich beyond measure, but he had never forgotten that kindness. He liquidated half his assets and gave it all to the war effort. The scale was unprecedented. Humanity was not sending a small force. They were sending an armada, ships gathered from every corner of human space. Warships, transports, medical vessels, supply ships. The fleet grew larger every day. Admiral Bora commanded Earth's 3rd Fleet, and she was put in charge of the entire operation. She was a serious woman who rarely smiled, but she had been on the Eternal Dawn too. She had been a young officer then, and she had watched the Velnar work themselves to exhaustion to save her ship. She had never forgotten. Bora sent a message to the Kryn Dominion. It was brief and direct. The Velnar are under human protection. Withdraw your claims and your forces or face the consequences. The Kryn leadership laughed when they received the message. Their intelligence officers analyzed the human fleet. Yes, it was impressive. Yes, the humans had good ships. But the Kryn had faced larger forces before. They had better strategic position and more experience. They sent back their own message. We do not fear you, humans. Withdraw, or we will destroy your fleet and take Velnaros anyway. Bora read the message and felt nothing but cold determination. The Kryn did not understand. They thought this was about military power or strategic advantage. They did not understand that humans had spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment. On New Terra, the shipyards had been working in secret. The survivors of the Eternal Dawn had included some of humanity's brightest scientists and engineers. They had formed a research group immediately after the rescue. Their mission was simple: make sure humanity could protect those who protected them. They called it Project Gratitude. 7 massive warships emerged from the construction bays. They were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen: sleek, powerful, beautiful, and terrifying at the same time. Each one carried technology decades ahead of standard galactic designs. These were not just warships. These were statements written in metal and fire. The largest was named the Eternal Dawn Reborn. Captain Mincio commanded it. She was the daughter of 2 Eternal Dawn survivors. She had grown up hearing the story of the Velnar. She had joined the military specifically to serve on this ship if it was ever needed. She had prayed it would never be needed. She had prepared for it anyway. Mincio broadcast a message to the entire galaxy, not just the Kryn. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive those who threaten the innocent. And humanity always pays its debts. The Velnar saved us when we had nothing to give them in return. Now we will save them, no matter the cost. On Velnaros, the population watched the sky and their screens. The human fleet was coming. Actually coming. Millions of Velnar could hardly believe it. They were so used to being ignored, to being dismissed as insignificant, and now the humans, who had become one of the rising powers in the galaxy, were risking everything for them. Thelis sat in his home with his daughter Elenis beside him. She held his hand as they watched the news together. "They are really coming," she whispered. "Father, they are actually coming." Thelis could not speak. Tears ran down his face. He had given up his ship, his cargo, his financial future to save those humans. He had never expected anything in return. He had certainly never expected this. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the Velnaro system and stopped. 400 warships, 200 support vessels. The 7 Project Gratitude dreadnoughts at the center, gleaming in the starlight. It was the largest military deployment in human history. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched on their screens. This was not just a military operation anymore. This was a test. A test of what the galaxy valued. A test of what mattered more: power or principles, profit or compassion. The Kryn fleet was already in position around Velnaros. 600 ships of various types. They outnumbered the humans and had better positioning. On paper, they should win this fight easily. But there was something the Kryn did not know. Something the galaxy did not know. The humans had not just built better ships. They had built them with love, with gratitude, with the memory of every Velnar face who had saved them, burned into every circuit and every weapon system. Admiral Bora stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked at the enemy fleet. She thought about Thelis, young and determined, pushing his ship beyond all safe limits to save strangers. She thought about Solith working beside Hyajin to patch impossible holes with impossible solutions. She thought about Velnar crew members sharing air with human children, breathing in turn so everyone could live a little longer. She opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "We are not here for glory. We are not here for conquest. We are here because 20 years ago someone showed us what true courage looks like. We are here because humans always remember a kindness. All ships prepare for battle. And remember, we fight not with hate but with gratitude." The wait was over. The debt would be paid. Part 1. The Dying Ship. The alarm screams echoed through every corridor of the Eternal Dawn. Captain Daiwan stood on the bridge, watching his screens fill with red warnings. His ship was dying and 50,000 people were dying with it. The colony ship had passed through a radiation field nobody knew existed. The ship's core had cracked open like an egg. Now air was leaking into space through 100 small holes. The life support systems were failing one by one. Daiwan looked at the timer on his console. 6 hours, maybe less. He pressed the emergency beacon. The message went out across the stars calling for help. Any help. The nearest rescue station received it immediately. They sent back a reply that made Daiwan's heart sink. 14 hours. They were 14 hours away. Hyejin, the chief engineer, climbed onto the bridge. Her face was covered in burns. She had been trying to seal the core breach with her bare hands and whatever tool she could find. "Captain, I cannot fix this. We need parts we do not have. We need time we do not have," Day One nodded slowly. He had known this already. He opened the ship-wide communication channel. His voice stayed calm even though his hands were shaking. "This is your captain. We have sent for help. It will arrive, but not in time. I am sorry. Spend this time with your families. Tell them you love them." In the medical bay, Taimin worked quickly. People were already getting sick from the radiation. Children cried. Parents held them close. He gave them medicine to stop the pain, but he knew it would not matter soon. The air itself was running out. Deep in the ship's lower decks, families gathered together. Some prayed. Some sang songs from Earth. Some simply held each other and waited for the end. Nobody screamed. Nobody panicked. They had accepted what was coming. 4 hours away, a small merchant ship picked up the distress call. The Gentle Current was not a rescue vessel. It was a tiny trading ship operated by the Velnar, a species most people in the galaxy barely noticed. The Velnar looked fragile with their translucent skin and large eyes. They were not warriors. They were not heroes. They were just merchants trying to make a living. Captain Thillis read the distress message on his screen. His crew member Solith looked at the calculations. "Captain, we cannot reach them in time. Even if we burn all our fuel, we will be 30 minutes too late. And we are not equipped for rescue. We carry trade goods, not emergency equipment." Thillis stared at the message. 50,000 lives. 50,000 beings about to die in the cold darkness of space. He thought about his own family back on Velnaros. He thought about what kind of galaxy he wanted to live in. He thought about what kind of person he wanted to be. "Dump the cargo," Thillis said quietly. His crew turned to stare at him. Solith spoke carefully. "Captain, that cargo is everything we own. 3 months of trading. If we dump it, we will have nothing. We will be ruined." "Dump it all," Thillis repeated louder this time, and set course for the human ship. "Maximum burn. Give me everything the engines have, but Captain, now!" Thillis shouted. Then softer, "Please. We cannot let them die when we might save them." The Gentle Current turned sharply in space. The cargo bay doors opened and valuable goods spilled out into the void. Textiles, medicine, art. Everything the Velnar crew had worked months to gather, all of it left behind, floating uselessly in space. The ship's engines screamed as Thillis pushed them far beyond their safety limits. The Gentle Current was not built for this kind of speed. Metal groaned. Systems overheated. But the small ship flew faster than it ever had before, racing toward the dying human vessel. On the eternal dawn, Day One watched his timer. 2 hours left. The air was getting thin. People were gasping now, struggling to breathe. Then a new signal appeared on his screen. A ship was coming. A small ship, but it was coming fast, too fast. "Impossibly fast, Captain," his communications officer called out. "We have a message from an unknown vessel. They say they are coming to help." Day One felt hope for the first time in hours, but he pushed it down. One small ship could not save 50,000 people. Still, maybe they could save some. Maybe the children could be saved. The Gentle Current arrived in 4 hours. Thillis brought his ship right alongside the Eternal Dawn, so close the hulls almost touched. The Velnar crew put on their emergency suits and crossed over into the human ship. They carried their own air supplies, their own repair equipment, everything they had. Ejin met Solith in the engineering section. They did not share a language, but they both understood machines. Together they worked, the human and the Velnar, using pieces from the Gentle Current to patch the Eternal Dawn. They welded metal plates over holes. They rerouted power systems. They did things that should not have worked, but somehow did. Taimin met the Velnar in the medical bay. They shared their air supplies with the sickest humans, taking turns breathing so that others could live a little longer. The Velnar were suffering too from the radiation, but they did not stop working. Captain Thillis stood beside Captain Day One on the bridge. Through a translation device, he said, "We have bought you time. 2 more hours, maybe 3. Will it be enough?" Day One looked at his screens. The rescue ships were now 10 hours away. He felt his hope dying again. They had gained a few hours, but they still needed so many more. Then he looked at Thillis, at this stranger who had sacrificed everything to help people he did not know. "You came anyway," Day One said. "Even though you knew it might not be enough." "Why?" Thillis's large eyes blinked slowly. "Because it was right. Because we had to try. For 6 more hours, the crews of both ships fought to keep the eternal dawn alive. They shared air. They shared food. They shared hope. The Velnar worked until they collapsed from exhaustion, then got up and worked some more. The humans did the same. Strangers became partners. Partners became friends. When the rescue ships finally arrived, everyone on the Eternal Dawn was still alive. All 50,000 of them. The rescue crews were amazed. They had expected to find corpses. Instead, they found survivors in the small Velnar crew who had made it possible. The gentle current was ruined. Its engines were burned out from the desperate speed. Its cargo was gone, floating somewhere in space. The Velnar crew had nothing left. Daiwan stood before Thyllis in the rescue station. Tears ran down his face. Behind him stood as many survivors as could fit in the room. They had gathered everything they could give: credits, jewelry, personal treasures. It was substantial, but Daiwan knew it was not nearly enough to replace what the Velnar had lost. "We owe you everything," Daiwan said. "Our lives, our families, our future. Please tell us how we can repay you." Thyllis accepted the offerings gracefully. Then he said through the translator, "You owe us nothing. Life is precious. We did what anyone should do. We did what was right." As the gentle current prepared to limp away on its damaged engines, Heejin grabbed Daiwan's arm. "We need to remember this. All of us. Forever. We need to remember what they did for us." Daiwan watched the small Velnar ship disappear into the stars. He thought about Thyllis and his crew, now ruined and struggling, having given everything to save strangers. He thought about the kind of people they were. He thought about the kind of people humans should be. "Humans always remember a kindness," Daiwan said quietly, "and one day we will repay this debt. No matter how long it takes, no matter what it costs, we will remember."